questions, and let's get a bit of background on, the overall product journey. You were in consulting and now you've created a SaaS compliance product. Like, that's quite a big shift. How did that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is I was an engineer first and cross-qualified as a lawyer. So I gravitated towards technology law. So that was all intellectual property, data protection, etc., information law. And I was general counsel of VC-backed SaaS companies for 13 odd years. And in that general counsel role, where you're in a growth company, it's ambitious as a company. So you're trying to get larger and larger customers all the time. And you're trying to platformize for growth and professionalize the company from when it was like, a couple of people in their dorm or something, moving up into being able to serve billion-dollar customers. So you're always looking part of the job is to manage the risk in the business. So you're implementing HR or health and safety or information security or data protection, all these different regulatory regimes into the business in a way that the business can take on. Not sort of saying that business can't take on complex, but it's already doing complex everywhere. So you have to make it really doable and achievable. And then at the same time, you want to show to the outside world a really good answer, because part of the role is you've got to help support revenue generation. And so this is one of the things people don't often think about compliance, but a lot of the general counsel role is overcoming sales objections and trying to head off those sales objections before they arrive. So for example, I got budget to do 27,001 in a little global group at the point when sales just got tired of having to fill in 40-page RFPs, and it was easier to tick the box about ISO 27001 because that was a sales requirement. But in the same time, in going through investment, through vendor due diligence, people do ask, what's your security, what's your data protection? So that's my background. So I've been a customer trying to implement and demonstrate for ages. And then I exited a startup in 2017, and I was actually going to do a different business. And when I was researching that business, I saw that actually there was a lot of discussion around GDPR at that time, late 2017. And the solutions that were out there at that time, I just thought, well, these are just too complex. They're not usable by the vast majority of businesses. In the UK, there's over 5 million businesses, but really, if you look at VAT and PAYE, you bring that down to about 2.5 million. And over 10 people, it's fewer as well. So 99% of UK businesses, 99.3 or 9, depending on the survey, are fewer than 250 people. They don't have specialist privacy, specialist security, specialist IT. They're often someone who's juggling lots of different hats. So for those sort of people, something really complex where you need a load of background knowledge just doesn't work. So I thought, well, my hypothesis is you need something for the mass market that's a lot simpler, more intuitive, and all that SaaS training that I'd had kicked in. I said, well, I've got these hypotheses, I'll go test them. So I did about 8 to 10 months of consultancy, basically looking at, well, were these hypotheses right? And there was a big thirst for just something simple, intuitive, because it's someone in IT or security, legal compliance or marketing or even HR who's doing GDPR and they've been thrown it and they're like, I don't know what to do. And particularly people who have been named the DPO and someone's gone, right, Robert's the DPO, job done, we can move on. And Robert's sitting there going, I've got no idea what I'm meant to be doing or how to do this on top of my other job. So that's really where Keepabl comes in. And we found really great, you can see the case studies on our website, thankfully we seem to have hit the target in terms of people find it a very, very intuitive, simple solution to use, but with all the sort of intelligent linking behind to help them get the job done. So that was the journey. And well, I wanted something to help me get my job done. I looked at what was on the market, thought that was all too complex, thought actually this is something I can bring my experience and expertise to as a customer and as a lawyer. And then that's how I ended up with Keepabl SaaS.
Okay. And I guess as you start as a SaaS company, right, the most important thing is building that customer base. But when you're in something like compliance, there's obviously a trust aspect there where you're a SaaS company and they might want an individual. So how did you bridge that gap of creating the trust of a person-to-person relationship while operating on a SaaS format?
Yeah, that's very true. So I think a large part of that is your brand, and your brand goes way beyond just the logo. It's in terms of the whole voice of your marketing. It's the whole voice of your company. It's the way you interact with people, the way you treat people. It's also through into your product. So as I say, that sort of product-led marketing is really the way that we're doing it, because the people who do the job see Keepabl and they go, this is fantastic. So our challenge at the moment is just getting more people who do the job to see Keepabl. So the actual communication part is really great. When people, about a year or so ago, certainly 18 months ago when we came out of beta, you had to describe what we were. And people were like, well, you know, there was a lot of myths still around then, like we're too small for GDPR, that's a myth. Or it doesn't apply to us, that was a myth. And the people who knew those were myths were still focused on trying to use spreadsheets at that time. Now, in the last sort of 6 months or so, certainly it's really changed in the market. Now, we never have to describe what we are. When we talk to people, oh, we're Keepabl, we're privacy management SaaS, and usually it's, oh, great, we're using spreadsheets. You just can't use spreadsheets to manage this. They're coming around to updating their spreadsheets for the first time and they're realizing it's just a nightmare. So people are looking in the same way you can do finance off spreadsheets, but Xero makes it much better. You can do sales off spreadsheets, but Salesforce or HubSpot makes it much better. In the same way, you can do GDPR spreadsheets, but SaaS just makes it so much better in the same way that those companies do for their sectors. So you can do so much more and create so much more. So part of it is that product-led nature, understanding that customer journey. And when we actually had a small customer, well, 80-person customer, prospect, I should say, coronavirus hit, because the procurement process has been, we can talk about coronavirus later, but this 80-person company said, look, we've looked at other people on the market, but you just understand how we work. And so that product-led, and that really came from the product and then from the communications that we had with them. So I think building that trust is showing from the product that you understand what they're trying to do. And then in the communications with them, reinforcing that. And this is, you know, at the moment, people are still coming to this market. It's gone from bleeding edge to leading edge into the adoption curve. But people are still sort of getting to grips with taking this on and all this stuff. So that's all part, obviously, of the company strategy as well. We can come back.
So I suppose from SaaS company to SaaS company, you know, at SeedLegals, obviously we were in a similar position. We automated legals and we had to build that trust. And 3 years later, you know, I'm talking to a founder like you that managed to raise through the platform. But one thing I knew is that trust was built. Would you say you are at a stage, or you could be getting to a stage where someone says, oh, your documents are from Keepabl, oh cool, like we trust them, like we've worked with companies that have used them before. Like, would you say you're getting there, or you're more at the stage where your customers are building that trust and referring other customers? Do you know what I mean?
Sure. So we've got quite a number of case studies on our website, and a 2-page case study has been called the best marketing material that you can get. And we've got a good feel on our website from, you know, small to large companies in different sectors and trade associations and what have you. So those 2 pages just help with, you know, quotes and testimonials about they were looking for something, but it had to be usable, it had to deliver what they needed, but also it had to be able to make their work with their advisors more efficient, all this sort of stuff. Each case study is generally on a different aspect. So those case studies help to generate that trust. And the thing is, the customers wouldn't give those case studies if they didn't feel that themselves. So that having that case study is a double thing, because it shows that someone's willing to say, yeah, I really like this and I recommend this. And then you've got all those different customers doing that. On the other side of things, we've actually had customers act as reference customers to prospects as well, even in competitive fields, which is amazing, because they see this world of privacy is very collaborative, actually. And the people who deal with privacy in different businesses, everyone's struggling with GDPR. It's like, how do I do this with not enough budget, not enough people, and not enough knowledge? And so everyone's looking for support from everywhere else. So the whole privacy industry and people dealing with privacy in different companies is fantastically collaborative. And so as well, to deal with that trust part, we've also launched something called Privacy Kitchen. So I'm in my kitchen now, and this is actually the setup of how I do the videos for Privacy Kitchen. And when we were going around talking about Keepabl to people, as I said, people who have often been thrown DPO, the data protection officer status, and they don't really know about GDPR, and why would they? And now that they're the DPO, they don't feel they can ask their colleagues, and actually their colleagues don't know anything about it either. So they're looking for this knowledge base and help, and they're often on restricted budgets. So what Privacy Kitchen is it's a way for those people to get free video help on GDPR and Privacy Kitchen, and GDPR and all things privacy. So we've got one on what is GDPR, 10 steps to GDPR. Do you need a DPO? Who can be DPO? And all this sort of stuff. What does the DPO do? So it's less than 10-minute videos on a range of aspects in GDPR, so people can just cover them off in the time it takes to have a cup of coffee. And so that exposes them to me. It exposes them to the expertise behind Keepabl. It is a separate brand, Privacy Kitchen, but it's from Keepabl, and we mentioned Keepabl. So the idea is we're going to be providing that support to people, but also help build that relationship. As most people go through the vast majority of the buying process themselves, this is all part of those touch points as well, while delivering that help to people who need it.
Okay, cool. And then building on that for marketing, right? There's this aspect of you build a brand, and a big way that I seem to hear that you're doing it is you create value, informational value for the customers, and in hoping that they'll come back to Keepabl. What are your other kind of tactics along that? You know, what was your marketing strategy to build your brand, particularly in a compliance role?
So for example, I think one of the big things with building a brand, as you say, it's about so many different things. I mean, when you're looking at asking someone to pay you money, as you say, they've got to trust you. So a large part of that is having all the right answers there. So we all of our internal processes and procedures, you can imagine, are all tip top, and we can give people proof on that when they want to contract with us. It's about having a great secure architecture for the application, being able to prove that as well. It's about showing that you've got the expertise in what you're doing. So this is, again, the blog posts we do, the independent research we do. Privacy Kitchen on its own is a separate thing that we do to engender that trust. We've got the case studies as well. And then so around all of that, we also do trade shows, so people will see us and see that we're there. We also do webinars. Part of Privacy Kitchen is that's the structure we're going to be doing, webinars and roundtables and this sort of thing. We also do outreach as well. So we have an outbound sales team and marketing team. And we also do a lot of content generation and posting on Twitter and LinkedIn, which is where most of our customers are. So all of that is to try and build the brand. But also we go for awards, for example. We went and did Finovate and spoke in front of 800 people at Finovate, and we were then interviewed by the FinTech Power 50, and we're actually now in the FinTech Power 50 2020 cohort, which is fantastic because last year FinTech Power 50 had people like Revolut and etc. So it's a really fantastic recognition. So we're in FinTech Power 50 for 2020. We were GDPR Company of the Year 2019. So this sort of awards and recognition as well all helps. We've had 5 nominations for Provider of the Year. 2 of those were for security innovation. So all of these show the third-party recognition of the innovation in privacy and security and etc.
Yeah, and I guess building on the myth versus is GDPR really a thing, and the regulation itself means it's ineffective. Are you seeing a mental shift where people took GDPR really seriously and then realized nothing happened, and now we're a bit like, oh, why would we pay to have someone do our GDPR? Like, they're not going to look at us anyway. Are you seeing a shift towards understanding the reality of it?
100%. I mean, I call it the GDPR trough. And so before May 25th, 2018, which is when GDPR came in, you'd have seen all these emails about trying to reconsent you for the marketing. There was this flurry of emails about consent around May 2018. And a lot of companies who knew they had to do something basically did all the public facing bit, like the marketing aspects and the privacy policies. And the larger, more medium-sized, larger companies actually did a full-on project. A lot of the smaller companies had these myths circulating around that it was like Y2K or all this sort of stuff. So a bunch of people did stuff around May 2018, but then a lot of people were waiting to see what happened. And because the UK Information Commissioner's Office, our data protection authority, didn't kick down doors on the 26th of May and say, here's £1 million fine, here's £1 million fine, companies were like, oh, it's nothing, it doesn't apply to us. And so it went really down, the interest went really down in sort of June, July, August. And then it started to come back up again towards the end of 18 when people realized, actually, well, those smaller companies, because obviously some companies realized this anyway, that those myths were myths. And it came into vendor due diligence, it came into investor due diligence. Most financial institutions have GDPR in their internal audit. It's one of my friends is a fellow founder at a different company, and he's just going through a fundraising, and they've got their data protection section of the due diligence questionnaire.
Yeah.
And it's all about what purposes do you process for, where are your Article 30s, what categories of data do you transfer? And it was like, well, so there's definitely a lot. It's all come through into business as usual. And so when you look at surveys from, say, the IAPP, there's a governance one from IAPP Ernst & Young, and they said the top 3 reasons for people complying with GDPR. Number 1 is that they're driven by the third reason, which is the regulatory fines. The top reason is the internal compliance requirement. The board of directors know that there's all these fines out there that are 20 million euros or 4% of global turnover. So BA intended fine 183 million, etc. So they know there's a fine risk, but they also know that there's a data breach. It's potentially the existential threat on their jobs, if not their company. And also they know that investors, auditors, big customers are all asking about this. So directors are saying, where are we on GDPR? They don't necessarily know what it means, but they know they've got to have a good answer on GDPR. So the internal requirements is the first one. The second one is those vendor, partner, and customer expectations, where they're going, look, how are you on GDPR? Before I trust you with my data, this is now in our due diligence, because it just has to be, it's the law. So that's the second big reason. And then those are all really underpinned by the new regulation with the new fine structure as well. So what we found is, yes, around May 18, there was a big sort of increase in attention, or the first attention on GDPR really. And then it fell off a cliff, and then that was the GDPR trough. And then through late 18, it started to come back, and through 19, it's just been building. And now really, I think we're into, everyone just accepts that GDPR is business as usual. You can't escape it. It's not going anywhere. You've got to, we had a 4-person building subcontractor say to us, I can't be a subby to a main contractor to a housing association unless I have a good GDPR answer with policies and training and all that sort of stuff. If you deal with the public sector, you've got to have GDPR compliance all the way through. If you deal with aspirational, if you're aspirational, you're dealing with different size customers, you've got to have GDPR in there. If you're fundraising, if you're having an audit, clearly if you're like a 2-person florist or hairdresser or a small business in that sense that's not regulated, you might not be being asked about it very much. But if you're a 2-person law firm or a 2-person physio clinic, you will be. So whether you're regulated or the type of data you do, so finance is big, technology is big, because people say, before we give you our data, how are you going to treat that?
I think jumping back to one of my first questions before we go on to the actual more fundraising focused question is, you're at a point where the product is good, right? And you're growing. That's a really long journey, particularly when it's to do with regulation and compliance. What would you say were one of the biggest roadblocks or time consumers as you built this product?
So I think that one of the biggest things in terms of the time it took is I really did the sort of Steve Blank and sort of lean startup approach, where I did this long consultancy period where I was building out prototypes and MVPs based off what I'd done before, and doing that with over 60 customers through that period, and really sort of iterating those through based on what they want before I went, right, now I know what the SaaS needs to do. So that obviously delays your start date. So that was one thing, but I think it was the right thing to do. And I think that's been reflected in the way that people react to our software. It's a very human reaction. It's really, really great. So that was the first thing, probably. Taking that route does just delay you to a certain extent, but you're doing it, I believe, the right way. Then obviously you've got to manage the cash flow. So obviously funding, so SeedLegals. So you've got to manage the cash flow because you're taking that time to do that. And then so you need to raise funds. So for example, SeedLegals is a fantastic platform to raise funds on. Everything's so automated, so easy. It's great value. It sort of fits with that whole, startup where you're trying to spend the money on sales and product, basically. So you try and keep spend everywhere else lower. So that's what I think. Managing cash flow is always, for a startup, one of the things. One of the big issues we've hit is, okay, we get this, as you say, the product is great. We actually beat market competitors regularly in head-to-heads, and these competitors have got thousands of employees and very high valuations. So we're doing fantastic. When we get the product in front of people, the next challenge is, how do we get the product in front of more people? And that's the big challenge. And that's where, off a small budget, you're looking at, well, we've got to be much more traditionally a guerrilla sort of startup about this. And that's where things like Privacy Kitchen comes in, and that sort of innovation. So the traditional trade show, you can easily drop sort of 20 grand on a trade show. and it doesn't necessarily do anything from
Yeah.
an ROI from getting a customer point of view. It does great stuff from an ROI from an awareness point of view. So it's balancing off those different competing aspects at this stage.
I think because I ran part of that for SeedLegals, which was the guerrilla warfare, where you're everywhere and everywhere, right? You are at all the events, people are like, well, how are you in so many places? And funnily enough, like I can tell you 3 years down the line, like 100% works, because one of our biggest referrals is from other founders more than anything else, right? And that was the beauty of it. It's the startup community is really gossipy and talks. But I suppose, as you mentioned, your competitors, you guys have come into the game kind of by storm. What was so unique? What is that special sauce that you're managing to compete with players that are a little bit further down the line?
Yeah, so essentially what it is our product philosophy is that we're product led. It's about that customer voice right at the beginning. It's about helping people get the GDPR job done. So very much looked at the Harvard Business School Get the Job Done framework when we were creating Keepabl, and looking at how I was looking to try and get the job done before. So that part of that startup process, that lean startup process, is you build that culture of customer-led, customer interaction, customer-driven product development. And I think some others have maybe rushed to bring products to the market that have, because it's a growth market, but sometimes the customer voice hasn't always been there. So you have to adapt very much to what that product is, or sort of dive around in it, or it has certain things for a certain product segment, but on another product segment, customer segment. So we very much focused on being a one-to-many platform, that you didn't need to be a privacy specialist to use it, because there's very, very few privacy specialists. And I think that comes through in the product design and the intuitiveness and that we often get people say, wow, this is so simple. They go, but I mean that in a good way. And I go, look, no need to try and apologize. I love that you think it's simple, because that was the key. I think one of the things there is they then go on to understand, and they say, but we absolutely see all this intelligent linking that's beneath it that helps us get all this output. We just do minimal input. We get all this great output for reporting and getting all of our GDPR records, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not that it's simple and doesn't do anything. It's simple and intuitive for the interface, but there's all this intelligent linking to deliver this huge amount of value to get the job done. So that's why we're doing really well in head-to-heads. And I think that's the USP, really. It's understanding that customer role just innately.
Amazing. So I think coming on to, what often is the $1 million question with people is the funding round. And something I always like to talk about is, would you say your angels are more than just capital, but advisors in your business? Like, did you choose smart investment, or did you just go for cash?
So that's always the thing, isn't it, about smart money? So I think like all businesses, I think we have a mixture, to be fair. So all of our shareholders are very supportive, without a doubt. All of our shareholders are very professional angels. We actually have an institution that led this round, which is fantastic. So this is a prized institutional investor-led round, which we're very proud about. So that institution, they're incredibly vested and they're fantastically supported. So that's incredibly smart money. We talk all the time. It's really, really supportive, really helpful, holds us to the fire, which is great. In terms of the angels behind that, yes, I would say probably, the vast majority, well, they're all very supportive and invested. I would say the level of interaction is naturally going to be a bit of a curve. But we have some, one's on our board. Others are continually sort of supporting by saying, hi, I've met this person, potential customer, or hey, have you thought about this for the product, or just helping through that way. And they're responsive, really, all of them are really responsive on all shareholder comms. I think you can, what you want is a certain number of voices in the process as well. So if you have 12 people who are investors in your company and they're all trying to be involved on a daily basis, that might be too many voices. So I think we've got a fantastic blend.
And are any of your angels kind of knowledgeable within the sector of compliance? When you were starting to look for them, were you looking for angels that had some background or had made investments ever before in that kind of sphere, or not?
So I was. So I was looking. So one of the things is actually the aim for Keepabl is to be the Salesforce.com of compliance. And by that, what I mean is the operational compliance. So when I was general counsel, you were really looking at data protection and information security, where the organizational compliance issues, the big ones that you had to get right to manage your risk and to win business and to grow the business. So those are our key focuses, and we're going to be adding to that. And if you look at Salesforce.com, they started off as a CRM tool, then they did aligned sort of sales aspects, and then marketing aspects, then they did App Exchange, and then Force.com. So that's the sort of trajectory that we're looking at. And so I don't really benchmark myself against, or Keepabl against privacy competitors or compliance SaaS competitors. Like, it's really benchmarking against successful SaaS companies, B2B SaaS companies. And so the people who are investors in Keepabl have absolutely relevant experience in that. And some totally have that experience in security and compliance as well, or they're in very regulated industries. I mean, one of our non-exec directors comes from he's the CISO of a US, a great Californian company, big data company. They've raised tens of millions. And he was actually a customer through a reseller earlier on. And he just liked what we were doing so much that he wanted to get more involved, and we were delighted, and we wanted him to get more involved. So he's a non-exec director now. So he brings a wealth of, and he deals with privacy there as well. So he's fantastically valuable.
I think just the last question on building those connections with the investors. Obviously, everybody goes into fundraising thinking it's going to be a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, and actually it takes a lot longer than that because it's a slow burn. It's a relationship building exercise. How long did that end-to-end journey take?
So I think we really wanted to release our pitch deck after the summer holidays last year. So we were working on the pitch deck through sort of the middle of the year before releasing it in September. And so we really started talking to people in September. And that's when we started getting intros and kicking it off, because you don't want to get those intros going in when everyone's on holiday. So it sort of started off in September. And so we were in sort of conversations through sort of October, November. Then you've got the Christmas bit. So we closed in February on our investment. So that's the period of time. I mean, it depends what you call the process. So, you know, you got to prep yourself to get ready for it. And part of that also is the due diligence process. So you got to have all of your, as my friend found, you know, all of your ducks in a row for all those questions on the due diligence, get your pitch deck looking great, get all the financial model, and then you start well, is that part of the process? And I would say it absolutely is. So if you talk about a 3-month process, I think that's an incredibly tight one if you're including everything in that. If you're looking at 3 months from we started talking to people till we closed it, I think people do talk about 3 to 6 months. I think that's more like. So using SeedLegals, I was able to use SeedLegals myself quite happily because I'm a lawyer and I've done funding. So I think the documents are really well drafted, all this sort of stuff. So I could just recommend them to the shareholders, I could say. So we went ahead really quite happily.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned options, and obviously that's something I think some people think, well, we're only going to implement later, but really you should implement it early because it shows that you already forecast growth in the company. Why did you decide to set up an options pool, and kind of how easy was it for you?
So again, I think I'm in a bit of a unique position because I've set up and managed option schemes before myself. So I think having options, so in the US, options are everywhere and everyone gets them. And I've been in a company in the UK where everybody got them, and that's a little bit. I'm in two minds about that. I think there should potentially be a seniority gating where you get options, but at the same time, I've decided not to follow that with Keepabl. I think everybody should have options. So it's a way to, you know, you're a startup. Even if you pay market salaries, you're still a startup, and there's that level of risk. And I think also giving people options, it means that they feel more vested in the company and excuse the pun, and they want the company to succeed even more. They can see that extra value. So for me, having an option scheme set up from the beginning was important. In terms of the US, there's obviously different aspects there. You need things like a 409A valuation and stuff like this. So if you've got so I've got external people helping me on that, but I've got a certain level of expertise myself on it. So that was already set up. So I didn't actually use SeedLegals platform for the options, but I know you have one in there. But EMI options are a fantastically tax efficient way to give great incentive to employees.
And I think then moving towards probably a hot topic now, which is Corona hit, a lot of companies' revenues were cut down because other companies were cutting their burn rates and, removing their SaaS subscriptions. Like, how much has it affected you? But I think more interesting, what opportunity has it given you to do for the business?
Yeah, so the coronavirus is an immense impact. I think unless you're someone like Zoom or a delivery company, you're feeling an immense impact. And we sell so our product at the moment is the GDPR product. So, we're adding to that going forward, but the GDPR product, obviously people buying that internally are people like legal, compliance, IT and security. So through that sort of March time, those were exactly the people going, oh my God, we don't have a remote work policy. What should be our remote work policy? How do we actually enable remote working? Well, that's what systems do we use, and then implementing them. And then kids all came back from school, and then it was Easter and everything. So there was a big hit to our sales pipeline in terms of moving people forward through the pipeline. We've now seen an uptick again in activity as people are used to working from home. They've got all sort of set up like we are. And so that momentum is coming back and people are sort of moving through the pipeline again. But there was definitely a period there. It also hit the funding. So for example, one angel said, actually, I need, for coronavirus to support my own business more. So I think that is something that is luckily we were through quite a long way through our funding raise, as I say, by the time it hit. So it's been an impact. We've taken the opportunity to do things like rebrand. So our branding colors, you'll see the website has had an iteration, and we're also changing the brand colors, talking about trust. So we launched with this sort of teal color, turquoise color, and I love that color actually, but I've got feedback that it should be a bit of a stronger color. And so what we've gone for is we looked at we did a proper brand exercise and looked at what are our brand values, what do customers see at us. We reviewed the whole of 2019 experience and said, okay, so about professionalism and expertise and trustworthiness and security, etc. And all of these sort of things are blue, but also it's modern and it's and it's agile, and that's a sort of a lighter blue. So we've got this dark blue, lighter blue rebranding that's coming through. So the website you'll see has been modernized, and then coming through as well the new colors of the double blue. So we're very excited about that. So we've taken that branding exercise, also doing Privacy Kitchen. So finding this setup takes a while. I was sort of sitting at the table before, then I was outside, or I was in, and then the phone kept changing focus. So getting set up properly for doing YouTube videos and getting that set out, that sort of stuff.
So I have just two more questions for you. And one is, I actually don't know if you use this. A lot of people face the point where Corona hit and either they were going to raise or they had a round that was about to close, and either they didn't have enough the money that they expected, or people pulled out. And what we saw at SeedLegals is a huge surgence of agile funding. So using seed fasts or convertible loan notes to raise ahead of your round, and weather this out and maybe raise a proper round in September, and alternatively closing their round in February and then topping it up through the next few months. Do you think if the market is staying the way it is, that's something that you would consider where you need more cash, or do you not look like you're going to raise again? Like what do you think will happen for Keepabl? So
I mean, you always plan to raise sort of 12 to 18 months money, don't you, as the sort of standard rule of thumb, and obviously your forecasts don't tend to include something like coronavirus hitting. So being fully transparent. So yeah, we obviously we're going to raise it. So not obviously we are going to raise again. We're a funded SaaS model which relies on periodic funding as you go through the stages. So doing something like that agile style of funding is interesting. Like maybe opening later in the year, early next year, something like that. Obviously, there's a period of uncertainty at the moment around when will the ease of restrictions happen on coronavirus, when will business as usual really come back. We're building out on these different initiatives. So that privacy kitchen initiative, for example, we were going to do in-person round tables, and we said, okay, we can't do those, so let's virtualize them. And then we looked at that 2019 activity and experience and feedback, Privacy Kitchen just came jumping out as something to do. So actually it's much, much better. We think it's a really innovative thing to do. And we've already got fantastic feedback about these videos from all over the place, from North America as well. So, I think there's positives and negatives, or rather you can, as you say, you try and use some of the negatives and spin out some opportunity from the crisis. So going forward, we'll see how we go. We're in good shape, and obviously you always look to raise more money as a SaaS VC-backed startup. So there'll be another funding coming, and the timing of that and the nature of that, I think a lot of that depends on the travel from now forwards. But I could see using convertible notes, absolutely. And SeedLegals has a great convertible note, of course.
And I think my last question, which is always, I think, the fluffiest, but can lead to some interesting answers. You obviously came into this startup journey with a lot of experience under your belt, which I can't say is the truth for a lot of founders. Regardless, have you had any big lessons learned as you ran Keepabl and you're a founder and CEO of your own company?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's a very tough one, actually. I think one of the things is it is hard being a sole founder if you don't have enough support. It's not hard being a sole founder if you have enough support. And so I think managing that right level of support has been illustrative. Also, I think you come to that whole delegation aspect. So there's certain aspects you can delegate in a startup and certain ones you can't. And then there's also a prism on that of, well, how good does the stuff need to be? And obviously we're a compliance company, so all this sort of stuff. So it's very hard. I've found it very hard to delegate fully, but you've got to. And also, I mean, that's a separate thing to recognizing where your weaknesses and strengths are. So I know I'm not a marketer, and I'm really, a compliance specialist and a process specialist and a SaaS and sort of product person. I'm not the sort of the marketing and finance and what have you. So I've got fantastic help there and help on product as well. So obviously I'm not dev, so I wouldn't understand the line of code, but I know about what a product can be and can't be. And I know sort of roughly on those lines. So I think I've not had a problem with recognizing where the bounds of my capabilities are, but I've had, apart from this delegation bit, which I've really had, that's been a real lesson. Otherwise, in terms of from the startup bit, I think, again, when I joined LoopUp, I was the 7th person. We had 4 people in San Fran and I was the 3rd in London. So I've been in small companies. And so I think the big challenge is time. There's just not enough time to do everything you want to do to be able to move stuff forward. And that's where funding comes in to get more people and more support, and that enables you to do more. And then you've got to obviously delegate in that. So it's been a journey on that front, but I think I made the right decisions along the way. You can always go back and pick over what you've done. And I think there's a lot of validity to that if you do it in the right way. I think there's a lot of danger to that as well, because you want to focus on, well, what lessons can I learn going forward? And so one of the lessons I learned was I've got to be able to delegate more and get the right people that I feel comfortable delegating to.
And this is really my last question, but it's an interesting one. How did you choose the people that you trust? Like, as a growing company, it's not necessarily where all the top grads are going. Like, how did you get a team that you trust?
Yeah, so recommendations is really key. I mean, you mentioned this before about customer trust. So I asked my network. I looked at qualifications very carefully, where it was more appropriate in some roles, less in others. And really it was about that cultural fit as well. So people talk about that a lot at the moment. It's so true that if you get the right person who's committed to the company and the idea, you know, they'll travel with you and you can take them wherever. But also I've been in growth companies where, you know, you can often just think, I just need some boots to fill that role. And you'll take someone in who isn't really right for that role. And then once you get past a certain level of growth, you start going, actually, well, what do we do with that person? And it can lead to some interesting discussions. So it's an understandable pressure at the beginning, but I've tried to resist that. And I think I've so far been successful in resisting that. And I've got people in the roles who are specialists in that role. So our family is much bigger than the Keepabl family is much bigger than the full-time employees, because there's like the outsourced finance. I worked with them. It's a great organization. I worked with them on a different startup before in the past. So it's that sort of a thing. I've got a ring of trusted advisors that I've used before, and then new ones that other people I trust have trusted.